Hey, writing ninjas, how you doing? So I want to take a look at a student sample today. This is a sample of an essay written by Ruben Ramos, and who was on his way to getting a degree in physics. Crazy. I ran into him a while back, like many years ago, some years after he had my class, and he was beginning his master's program at UTEP. So, whatever you're aiming for, just keep on keeping on with it because you can do it. But Ruben, he was okay with writing, but I think you'll see, I think you'll see that's a he said from this. And, when we look at samples, just remember these are students just like y'all. Some of them come in and they're good writers and they're like, I love writing. Yeah. Some of them come in and they're like, I don't like writing so much. And they end up doing stuff. So trust the process. Wherever we're at in the process of this essay, trust the process, follow it through, think about it thoughtfully, but don't overthink it. Right? Let it come out of you and then let me help you. And of course, what we're looking at with these samples are after the drafting and the revision, the work that's done. So they're the end product. They're what we're aiming for, and they all started out as pieces and pre-writings. So without further ado, let me just get to checking this, showing you this. So on the emblematic essay page, remember, there's a ton of student samples. One of those is just like Papi Guero, but you can see, so if you want to look for inspiration, see what other people have done, how they've done it, and then say, okay, how would I do my idea, right? Then check it out. So here we go. Here's Rubens. And you can see, whenever we take a look at this is MLA format. So this part, that's the heading, heading, is only on the first page. Don't put it up there where your header goes, right? That's your last name and the page number. And then this only goes on the first page. Notice that we've got that centered title. There's no extra space between paragraphs. It's all double spaced, that kind of thing. We're shooting for 3 pages. I'm not crazy like all the way to the bottom, but you need to have a full, a third page that has some substance. So let's check out and see what Ruben has to say. This is called Just Like My Papi Guero. I remember my grandpa very well. Like a vault, I can open up the memories and look back to see his face, hear his voice, and feel his presence. That was the most noticeable feature about him. His presence was what everyone remembers about him. You always knew when he was around. However, the word grandpa seems so generic, and it always felt odd to call him that. To my brother, my sister, and me, he was more of a father than a grandfather. In fact, everyone in our family knew he wasn't just our grandpa. He was our Papi Güero, and I remember wiping a tear from a pane of glass. The summers I spent at my home in Juarez were the best summers of my life. I spent all day with my grandpa and grandma just following them around, seeing what I could get involved with. I'm not even going to lie, they spoiled me. That's what grandparents do, right? My mommy Vicky and Papi Güero didn't shower me with gifts or give me any money, but I didn't care because they loved me like no one else. I looked up to them, and on occasion, when I needed to, I'd crouch down behind them when I was afraid. I could always count on them for my protection cuando yo estaba chico, when I was little. They were my guardians, and I knew nothing could hurt me. I knew nothing could hurt me because my grandpa had his walking stick. He carried his walking stick when he would roam around their property at night, making sure the gate was locked and all the dogs were fine. You see, my home in Juarez was not in a good neighborhood. Around my casa, there was always the threat of break-in. Mi Papi Güero made sure that didn't happen. He made sure no one would get his grandson. He was not a violent man or anything, but he wasn't a pushover either. He carried himself very high, and his eyes were always scanning the horizon. As he walked, he ate his fruit. Usually it was an apple, but on occasion he had a peach when he craved it. In one hand he held his fruit, and in the other his walking stick, a machete. It was almost as if they were one. They shared the same characteristics down to even the smallest detail. Like my grandfather, the machete had its signs of age. The side of the blade had scratches that overlapped each other time and time again that looked like a matrix of lines. The tip of the machete was much broader than the lower end. As it came to the handle, I could see where it had been regripped and retaped. The indents of my grandpa's hand remained on the grip even after it had long been put away for safekeeping. The entire machete may have looked like its days had come to an end, but like my grandfather, the edge of the blade was still sharp and a glimmer could be seen when the light hit it. That stick still had plenty of fight in it. Most of the time, it was used to cut an apple in half or maybe chop some tree branches that were beginning to be very annoying every time we passed by them. However, on those nights where the creaking wouldn't stop and there would be non-stop barking from the dogs, it was where it belonged, in the grip of my Papi Guero. There were some nights where I could see his shadow from my bed putting on his coat. He would go and see what the dogs were barking at. It usually seemed like an eternity until he came back. Sometimes I'd catch a glimmer from the machete when the moonlight hit the edge of the blade just right. He would come inside and hang up his coat. His trusty sidekick was put right next to it on the wall, the same place that it always hung. He always knew I was awake, and he'd whisper in my ear, "Todo está bien, mijo, duérmete." With a kiss to my forehead, I'd fall asleep knowing that his walking stick was there. If he needed it, it was there, and I knew it would never let him down. I knew he would never let me down. He was always there. A tear rolled down my cheek and landed on a pane of glass. It was the pane of glass that separated me from my Papi Güero. It was an open casket. The top had been removed, but in its place was a glass covering. There was my hero, my friend, my Papi Güero. My mom was by my side, but she was so distraught that I had to sit her back down. When we walked back to our seats, memories kept going through my mind. Then I wondered where his walking stick was. The thought stuck in my head until I was able to ask my mom about it later. She said they had locked it up. My mommy Vicky couldn't stay there. It was too hard. I don't know if they've unlocked the house or if my grandma has gone back to start boxing things up. But I keep thinking about the machete. It may still be hanging right where my Papi Güero left it. It could be boxed up, waiting for me to find it. I have my own machete now, and with it I keep thinking of my Papi Güero. It feels safe. It brings back memories of my childhood. It's soothing. It has a presence, just like my Papi Güero. Wow. Wow. Now again, remember, that's the final product, okay? It's a process, okay? But you can see what's happening there. You know, one of the things we're working on with this is that description. And so, you know, Ruben creates that, those images of, you know, him and the dogs barking at night and that machete, for instance, check that out. Check this out, how he has described his Papi Güero. And then you know, also describes the machete there. It says, the tip of the machete, and this is on page 2, was much broader than the lower end. As it came to the handle, I could see where it had to be re-gripped and retaped. The indents of my grandpa's hand remained on that grip, on the grip even after it had been long put away for safekeeping. The entire machete may have looked like its days had come to an end, but like my grandfather, the edge of the blade was still sharp, and a glimmer could be seen where the light hit it. Oh, and then I missed a line. The machete had its signs of age. The blade had scratches that overlapped each other time and time again that looked like a matrix of lines. So he's describing this thing, right, of details, just really thinking. And, you know, if you don't have this object you're describing, if it's lost to time or it belongs to someone else, close your eyes and really picture it in your mind, feel it, you know, just imagine yourself with it or that person with it. Really just, I know this sounds like all artsy fartsy or whatever, but I mean, it really does. When you're describing and you don't have that thing, you want to imagine it. If you have that thing, hold it in your hand, look at it, feel it, touch it. You know, what does it look like? I don't know if you can see, oh, look, I got spots. I spilt something on my case. If I'm not talking about my phone case, there are these spots where clearly I spilled some Kool-Aid or something. I don't know. I washed it, and they won't come off. I'm going to describe those, that texture of it. What does it feel like? Is it cool or slick? So, in terms of thinking about description, that's where we want to go with that. If you're watching this and we've already done that part and you have more ideas, go back and add that into your pre writing. If you're watching this and it's very likely we haven't even done anything yet, when you're thinking about what object you're going to choose or you're fixing to do pre writing one, just really think about what does this thing look like, feel like. I mean, anything, smell like, whatever you can get in there. But also notice, I want you to notice Ruben did a number of other things too. Um, he uses Spanish in it. So because he's talking about Papi Guero, his grandfather, Guero, white, he's pale, right? And you'll notice that there are italics here. So we use italics in writing for two technical reasons. And in this class, we're learning the technical reasons, okay? So one of them is if we're using words from another language, like Spanish. So here he's using Spanish. Now, there's only one time he doesn't translate, and so you've got to, because you don't know if all of your audience is going to read whatever language you might speak if you're talking about a grandparent or somebody you know. Or I had one student talking about when she lived in Japan for a while and she used some Japanese. Well, my Spanish is like Spanglish, not real good, but okay, I can get most of it. My Japanese is non-existent, right? I do not speak Japanese, so she had to, put the translation in. Let's look at how he does that. Um, he doesn't do Papihuero because that's more of a name, so that's not that, big of a deal. But you'll notice everywhere he does that. Here he italicizes grandpa. And so the second reason we use italics is when we use a word as a word. And he says the word grandpa. If I say the word the, I'm going to put it in italics, the word grandpa. So if you're talking about the word, then do that. If you're using another language, put it in italics, okay? Notice here we've got Mommy Vicky and Papi Huero, and that's kind of like you don't need to italicize taco, okay? Like that's like become worldwide. People who don't know what a taco is, I am sad for them. If you don't know what a taco is, you should have a taco. Tacos are great. Um, so some things, but here he says, I could always count on them for my protection cuando yo estaba chico. And this is the bottom of page 1. And then he has this dash, so the two hyphens, when I was little. And so he's translating that there. Here, you'll see there's another place where at one point he says my casa. I can't remember if we decided around my casa in Juarez. Um, here he did put in italics. It's close enough. It might be kind of like taco or burrito that you don't necessarily have to, italicize it. Things that have just become kind of part of standard language. In German, I wouldn't italicize schnitzel. So, here's one place though where he doesn't um, translate. He always knew I was awake, top of page 3, and he'd whisper in my ear, Todo está bien, mijo, duérmete. With a kiss to my forehead, I'd fall asleep knowing that he has his walking stick. Now, if you don't speak Spanish, you may not know what that means. But if you imagine the grandpa coming in from outside, checking to make sure everything was all right, and going in and checking on his young son and grandson and giving him a kiss to his forehead and, good night, and he would say, everything's okay, right? And so you don't need to know, you don't always need to know exactly what it is. That picture that he has painted, that description in that story, is actually telling us what he said. Whether we know exactly what it means, we know the essence of it. Now, when you leave that out is a judgment call, and it's one you want to pass by some readers. Ruben, and we had talked about it, he's like, I don't know, and like when we were workshopping, I'm like, I really don't think you need it there. If you want to put in the translation, go ahead, and I'll let you know. He decided not to, and I think it was a good choice because even if you don't know Spanish, he said something soothing and grandfather-like, right? And this is everything's okay, little one, go to sleep, okay? So this is one example, and Ruben's is a fine example. All the samples are fine examples, and yours will be a fine example, right? I'll never throw it out there. I have permission to use student samples. So But this is where we're going in the end. So again, remember these samples are final drafts. But just think about, really think about with Rubens, what I really want you to think about is the way he does, well, overall, but also the way it's not, he's not using big words. He's just saying, when I was a kid, they would spoil me, right? That's what grandparents do, right? I mean, he's got that question in there like that, which we're going to avoid in more formal essays. So it is kind of informal. He's using the language that's comfortable to him, and some of that is Spanish. You don't want to go like on paragraphs. It is English class and we're writing in English, but part of this kind of informal writing is integrating the way you speak. So that's okay. If somebody says something, if you're writing a part where somebody says something, putting in that in the quotes to show they said it. So anyway, I mean, Rubens offers us a lot. Again, go check out the page with all the samples on the English 1301 emblematic essay page and take a look at some of them, but also trust yourself and trust the process. So there you have it, a sample essay. I'm sure I'll be back to tell you, to share others with you. So let me know if you have questions. Take care of yourselves and keep on keeping on.